Loibner-Waitkus.
Okay, I'm Alan Loibner-Waitkus, and this is American Lit, 1865 to present. And we're going to try something a little different with the Vonnegut this week with Bluebeard. And so I'm bringing in a former student who graduated with the honors program from UCA in English, right? And as a Juris Doctorate from U of A, Fayetteville. And so rather than do it myself, we're just going to hit on some key stuff and rather than me talk for 87 hours like I normally do. First off, though, Kurt Vonnegut. Every semester I rotate Vonnegut novels and do them in order, and we are third to last. There's Bluebeard, and then Hocus Pocus, and then Timequake. And the thing about Vonnegut is, Vonnegut really does not have a bad novel. Some of them are better than others, but, they're all pretty strong works, and so that's something I wanted to do in this class is rotate this to keep my own sanity. And Vonnegut's an interesting character as far as an author goes, in that Slaughterhouse-Five at one point was the most taught novel in the country, which is about Slaughterhouse-Five. Kurt Vonnegut survived World War II as a prisoner of war and wrote that book, and so it's probably the most taught book about World War II, even though it's science fiction. He's known as a science fiction author, even though in this story we don't really see any of that as we normally do. And he's also known as a black humorist, sort of picking up where Mark Twain left off. The interesting thing about Vonnegut, one of the author who wrote, and you can go to a link on the website if you want his authorized biography. The guy who wrote that mentions in the biography, and this is something a lot of people mention in stories, one of Kurt Vonnegut's favorite things to do, and this is, again, after Slaughterhouse-Five, after, being a best-selling author and being taught so much, there was a book that they published that was basically listed all authors of any worth ever to publish anything, and Vonnegut's name was absent. So Jennifer and I are just going to hit on some stuff, and she's smarter than I am, and seems to have gotten this better than I have, so we will go through some things. So let's go through. I want to note this too. Vonnegut loves to pull characters in from other stories. He's got a character named Kilgore Trout, who we see in most of his stories. We don't see in this. Rabo Karabekian briefly makes an appearance in Breakfast of Champions, which is second maybe to Slaughterhouse-Five as far as the popularity of Vonnegut's novels. And sadly, it's, in my opinion, his second to least, or second to, I guess we would call it his, what's that word? The people use all the time wrong, incorrectly. Damn it.
Penultimate.
Penultimate. Yes, I would call Breakfast of Champion his penultimate book, which means second to last. I think Slapstick's a little weaker than Breakfast of Champions. All of his other ones are excellent. And those two both are good. They just, he gets a little out of control. So let's start with Rabo Karabekian and his past and sort of this importance of the Armenian thing. What role there?
Well, let's see. It's his background's important because it brought him where he is. So he's got Armenian parents, and they are cheated famously by Vartan Mamagonian, and everything comes from that big cheat. So it's he's sent them to San Ignatia, where there's not actually an Armenian community where they thought they would be meeting up, and he later is jealous because he runs into an Armenian guy in Paris, which is where they would have ended up perhaps instead, and he's envious of the life that he could have had that he sees in this guy. So he's got an immigrant's background. He feels that he's been cheated out of the community that he could have had, maybe.
Right.
And he spends, when you come to another country, there's all the promise of being, in a new country, but he strongly does not want to be the shoemaker that his dad is.
Right.
He really wants to do something different. And maybe that's a very second generation America thing to feel, that whatever your parents did to give you the life in America that you have right now is not good enough for you.
Right. Oh, that's interesting.
Or maybe they want more for you, and that's what causes that idea.
Well, I think too the other key here with the Armenian thing is this genocide, right? Because we're going to see that again with the Holocaust and World War II, and so I think that that's one of the things too. He's tying in,
and his parents' trauma. His parents both have different types of post-war trauma.
Yeah, and what's interesting about Vonnegut is German. I mean, he's American-born, but he's of German descent, and he loves to tell stories about his aunt married cousin. Someone married somebody from Germany, and the mayor of Indianapolis had to send. Have you read that?
No.
The mayor of Indianapolis had to send a letter saying that she was of no Jewish heritage, and so that they would allow her to marry him under Hitler. And it was funny because he talks about the mayor actually, how many official stamps, and he put every bell and whistle and stamp and sticker on the damn thing to make it look official when it was, this really ridiculous idea. Yeah. All right, and then of course we do have the Mother's Jewels things that pop up again with the painting later. So, okay, we're looking kind of down at notes too that we made earlier. Modern art. What do you think?
So he goes to Dan Gregory against the Armenian connection, right?
Right.
And Dan Gregory really despises modern art.
Right.
He's very against it, and he's very into accuracy. So what he's trying to impart, insofar as he's even trying to impart anything to Robbo, is he's trying to impart this super accurate, highly detailed kind of realistic looking thing. He counterfeited a note when he was learning. And so he's trying to import that style to Robbo, and it turns out to actually be a real problem in his art later. He surrounds himself with all of these modern artists that are much more about feel and soul, and that's missing from his art education, except for the times that he goes to the Museum of Modern Art and those forbidden trips.
Right, which is interesting because that's sort of his way of cheating,
yeah.
too. I think it ties in interesting with the cheating part. But my question would be, where does Vonnegut stand on this then? What Vonnegut, modern art, do you think he's a fan more of that or a fan more of realism? Right, and then a quick explanation on art here. You're dealing with, in art, people use the term abstract incorrectly a whole lot. Art is either, representational, meaning it looks like what it is. It's non-representational, and that's what most people consider abstract. That's where it sort of looks like nothing. Like when you paint, what was it? The Duralux painting. Remember the name? Blue
Windsor.
Yeah, it was just named after the paint, and there was no. That's what non-representational art. Abstract art is more like cubism and those kinds of things, where you can kind of make out it's someone playing a guitar, but you're approaching it in a different way. Now, what's interesting here is Vonnegut's doing both abstract and non-representational art, and a little bit of representational art. In fact, on your textbook, the drawing on the front, which I would consider abstract, and again, we're looking at an older copy here, so I can't hold it up, but if you've got one of the newer copies, it's a work by Vonnegut. It also has a sort of representational drawing of himself on the back that he did. So, Vonnegut is sort of known for that. But, I'm curious as to that and how that ties into, because again, one of Vonnegut's criticisms is most of what he had written before was science fiction. Which again I would equate with non-representational, right, or at least abstract. Whereas everyone else, and that's one of his criticisms. He kind of got out of control with it, and then he's really kind of pulling the reins in on his more the novels before he died in 2007. There are a lot less of the science fiction stuff than we saw before, and this, like I said, had none in it whatsoever. So anyway, that's something to think about. And tying that into Circe Berman, right? With because you've got sort of Circe Berman, which he doesn't consider to be great literature, right? But sells, versus Paul Schlesinger, right? Is that right? Schlesinger, who's writing, what we would consider, real legitimate literature. And I think, Vonnegut would have fallen into that. In critics' views, Circe Berman category, that he was selling, popular crap, whereas Paul Schlesinger, I'm going to say that wrong every time, wrote real stuff that wouldn't sell. And I think Vonnegut kind of considered himself to be more in the Paul whatever thing. But it's interesting because, right, after Paul, does he attempt suicide? What is he institutionalized for? Remember?
He
said it happens every few years.
Yeah, I don't
he
think
has some sort of nervous
I didn't
breakdown.
I didn't get that he attempted suicide, but more that he had some sort of mental break and he was going so nuts they came over, and when the authorities arrived, he said he'd be fine if they took him over to Rabo's house.
Right. Now, but then when he comes back, right, he says that Cersei Berman is sort of the most brilliant author to ever.
Yeah, and early on in the book, Rabo knows this, and he won't tell Paul, who's berating
that he's really
Cersei,
Polly Madison,
that she's really Polly Madison. He's been reading her books. He'd be so ashamed it would kill him. Maybe it has something to do with that.
Well, you think, so do you take that at face value that he has an epiphany that Paul has an epiphany that her works really are this good, or do you think it shows that he's gone crazy?
Once he knows that it's her, they're not just pretty good books and good sellers. He makes them out to be just really grand literature. Like, this is the pinnacle of American literature. He really overplays them once he knows that it's hers. After he's read all of them all summer.
Well, why do you think he does that?
Embarrassment, because he treated her like
so you think it's more so like
artist, yeah.
So you think it's more so like I had to pretend Norman Mailer was the greatest author because he was a family friend.
Maybe, or maybe hers sell and his don't, and he thinks that she's got the key to some secret success that he doesn't. She's doing what he can't do.
Yeah, well, and it's that's when I was in grad school, and I don't know if you did a lot of time with this with other stuff. We had to study Harlequin romance novels because those were the best-selling novels.
Yeah.
And so it was like in order to understand literature, you have to. Anyway, okay, we'll move on from that. Okay.
Gotta know what crap looks like when you're trying to learn how to find the good stuff.
Yeah, the Duralux. We'll skip that.
Sateen Duralux.
Well, I mean, what is that? But what's the importance there of all of Paul? All of Rabo's paintings.
So he uses Sateen Duralux,
right?
Which he had promised it was supposed to be the most vibrant, and he had promised that the Sateen Duralux would outlast the smile on the Mona Lisa, and it turns out to be a hilarious joke because it all just falls right off the canvas. It leaves the canvases almost clean, and then he sold all of these paintings that were supposed to be these great works of art that would outlast the Mona Lisa, and he comes into you go into a storage room. And there's like Rice Krispies and tape on the floor where all of his paintings are completely fallen apart.
Well, what do you think? What do you think Vonnegut's doing there?
Well, so it didn't outlast the Mona Lisa. Maybe he's pointing out that it's not great art, or maybe he's pointing out that it's ephemeral and really it's always just paint on a canvas. Maybe that's what he thinks of his own art.
That's where I go with this. I think it's more of Vonnegut's dealing with a lot of stuff right here, and we didn't really get to his past. He had a failed marriage. He's sort of in a new marriage, and his wife. He actually probably had we know he had a drinking problem. He caught their house on fire, and she had kicked him out. And this is around this period. I think she'd let him move back in at this point. I have to check my dates on that. But I think, too, he's questioning the survival of his own mortality. And then will his work survive, after his death? And so I think it's almost his fear that, again, if his works aren't being read, then it might as well be, paint that's fallen off the canvas in a way. The remodeling of the house. I think I jotted that down when you weren't looking. So now I'm going to put you really on the spot. Okay. What's the point in where he goes to?
She sends him away to New York, and then while he's gone, she immediately starts remodeling his house, which she hates. And it's supposed to be a gallery.
Right.
It's painted white, and he's got all of these works of art hung everywhere. And then she redecorates just the entry to the house. So the focal point when you walk in, that has been so lauded by magazines and things.
People come from all over the world.
People come from all over to come look at this thing. And she has done the worst possible thing that he can think of to it, which is paper it over with giant rose wallpaper and paint the boards baby shit brown, I think.
Right, yeah. It's like that.
And then she hangs up.
Brown or green.
Yeah. And then she hangs up these photos, not these photos, but these drawings of little girls on swings. So he finds it sentimental and disgusting.
Right.
And maybe probably ugly colors and loud. It's the opposite of the gallery that he was going.
Right. It's everything is sort of what he's supported.
Yeah. When he moved in, didn't his wife originally come in and strip all the wallpaper off the place? Like, she hates wallpaper.
Yeah,
it's also maybe a minor desecration of his wife's memory.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely that kind of thing. Well, and it's interesting too that he, which I'm really going to jump off point here, but again, he and Circe Berman never have sex. He notes that. There's no love kind of relationship there. But then the book is dedicated to her. And then he uses the term near the end. When does he use the term that something that they do after she sees what's in the potato barn, which we'll get to? It's post-coital. Yeah, he gets into that interesting. So that's kind of an interesting.
Calls her languorous.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too that he's got 2 wives in the
yeah
story and in real life. That's interesting too. And we go back to getting the kids don't have anything to do with him. The book actually starts with a quote from his son. And Vonnegut's really interesting. He raised 7 kids, 8 total, I believe. There were 2 who were actually, and again, my numbers I'm not sure, 2 who were actually his, and I think 4 or 5 who were adopted
from like
his sister. His sister actually died of cancer the same day or the day after her husband was killed in a freak train accident, a commuter accident in I think New Jersey. And so he will say he adopted the kids. He actually raised them, but never reared them, but never formally adopted them. But no, Mark Vonnegut, the quote from is actually his child in real life. And then Nanette, who is we mentioned that earlier, but she is the youngest one that he has with his second wife.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, on that. Okay. What the hell word do I have here? I can't read my own handwriting.
Starts with a C. Counterfeit.
Oh, okay. Again, we go back. Yeah, that was the big thing because she started off with this idea of them being fooled into going to moving to the town that was going to be Armenian. They were going to get this great house, and then we see, that question of if what he learns to do is counterfeit $1, right? Dan Gregory makes him.
Yeah, so Dan Gregory, when he's learning from his mentor, he's the guy that makes he makes the money, or he designs the money, and so he proves that he has sufficiently learned how to do his art by counterfeiting a bill. And so his idea of perfection, Dan Gregory's idea of perfection, is ultra realism, and it's the question becomes, when he teaches Robo how to do art his way, essentially, when that's his idol or whatever. He later goes on to an art school, and the art school won't accept him because it's counterfeit. It's not real art. It's perfection and it's realism, but it has no soul.
Well, I think it's interesting too because that's what the acceptance guy, the guy who accepts him into art school is he can't come up with words for what's wrong with it. It's just soulless, but can't even come up with. Does he say soulless?
Yeah, he does.
Okay, but before then he couldn't even articulate the word. Huh. Okay. The Lost Eye. What's the? We didn't discuss that before this.
Oh, we discussed a little bit with the Merrily scene, but so he's lost an eye and it's a war injury. Is that where you want to go with this?
Yeah, I mean, what's Vonnegut saying by giving him a lost eye? I mean, we tied it in earlier with women and them not knowing that.
Right.
But I mean, I think that there's again, it's hard to read any of Vonnegut's works and not see his protagonist as Vonnegut. Maybe I do that a little bit much. But what is the point of this lost eye?
Well, he's missing an eye, but he says he really downplays it. He says that he can't tell that it's all that much different seeing the world through one eye. Mm. And then he talks about how he really didn't have that much pain, and it was he had access to surgeons and whatnot.
Right.
So as far as a war injury goes, he downplays it a little bit, except that he finds it very ugly and embarrassing to expose. Like when his eye was exposed when the patch fell off, he found that very disturbing that they'd all seen his eye without the patch.
Right.
So it's, I don't know, maybe the lost eye is something that he downplays as really being missing, and he doesn't think about it much, but he's got a half view on the world with his art and a half view on the world with being kind of an outsider.
Well, and it's interesting too, because I think having one eye messes with perspective, right?
Yeah.
So I think we're viewing it through. He's sort of viewing the world through a tainted perspective, which is why what's in.
I think if you did like a split perspective, like seeing the world when I don't know,
half-assed. We're half,
like he's only seeing halfway, yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to the potato barn. So again, this is not a I'm trying to think back. Vonnegut, one of the thing Vonnegut talks about in Palm Sunday and another one of his autobiographical collections. He has two. Juan Peter's Foam and Grand Falloons is this other one, and then in later writings and letters and things is this obsession. He taught at Harvard, he taught at New York City College, and he taught at the University of Iowa, which, believe it or not, is the most respected creative writing school in the country. And one of the things that he always talks about when he discusses teaching writing is he tells students to tell them how it's going to end at the very start.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, this is how it's going to, to let them know how it's going to end. And the interesting thing here is this is really the only book that I can think of that he's got that really has much of a cliffhanger. Matt, Jennifer's husband's in the background. There's a little bit of cliffhanger in, you read, Mother Night.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so in Mother Night, I guess there's that cliffhanger on we don't know if he's going to escape, if he's going to be... Basically, he's going to go on trial. The narrator's going to go... The protagonist is going on trial for war crimes, and we want him to be free in our minds, I think, as a reader. I did, at least. But I didn't realize that... way off subject. Katie called me yesterday, a friend of ours. This is what we do during these videos. Matt, her husband's laughing, but y'all have seen these videos before, which relax. Katie called me the other day talking about Gilmore Girls, and she thought we were supposed to see, so we're going to talk about Gilmore Girls now. She thought that Lorelai was supposed to be a bitch. Like, that's how she interpreted it. She thought that she was a petty bitch, and that was the point, that she was overreacting to how the mother, to everything, and that she was kind of petty with the daughter, and that kind of thing. And so I said, no, I kind of explained it like I explained Will and Grace to people. Basically, if you watch Will and Grace, the plot is basically somebody does something that pisses somebody else off, and they overreact to it, right? And then they solve the problem. So if you ever watch Will and Grace, it's always like somebody doesn't really do something that's that bad, and then the other person overreacts, and then that's the conflict for the rest of the episode. I don't know what that had to do with anything. But anyways, my point was, again, assuming that the character in Mother Night you're rooting for. That's one of the only other stories I can really think of that we don't know at the beginning how it ends.
Okay, so when Alan gives me this book, he's already read it, and he gives it to me, and he says, I'm really coming into it. I'm getting into it reading this again because I've forgotten what's in the potato barn. Like, I don't remember what's in the potato barn. And so I need to get to the end of the book because I can't remember what's in there. Were you disappointed? Is that what you
that's
forgot?
A good call.
Were you disappointed?
Yes. Yeah, well, and that comes from, let's go to that. Bluebeard, the importance of this, because this will be a test question. Again, the importance of Bluebeard is Bluebeard told his wife, he wouldn't whatever you do, don't look in this room, don't look in this room. And it's irresistible. She's got to know. Yeah, you got to know what's in the room, right? It's like, did your parents tell you not to put your tongue in the hole if you lost a tooth? No, you never heard this.
No.
When this is common.
You can't stop like tonguing the whole.
Right. Well, what happens is you're taught when I was a kid. It was maybe a family thing. I think other people's parents told this, but that your tooth would grow back in gold if you didn't stick your tongue in the hole. Right. And of course, I was like, nobody's got gold teeth, and what's the thing? And then of course, immediately you realize, because the second somebody tells you that, the first thing you do, no matter how much you want that gold tooth to grow in, is you stick your tongue in that damn hole. And so that's what. So the potato barn was the same way. So yeah, I know it's interesting you ask that, because I kind of wanted something interesting. I mean, I didn't want it to be art that he'd saved up, and I didn't want it to be.
Ideally, you want it to be a body, maybe, because Bluebeard. I don't know, something more exciting than an 8x64 canvas with highly, detailed art on it for some reason.
Yeah, I don't know.
He's a painter.
I don't know. It's funny because I even had to, when I was reading it, and I'd read it before years ago, but couldn't remember. So that's an ultimate sign that it didn't impress me that much. But I actually had to call my dad, who was reading it at the same time, and say, wait, that's all that's in the potato barn is this damn painting? Right when I read the part. Now, as they get into it more detail, then you it's clear that that's the only thing.
It's clearly like a masterpiece, and he's been saving it for the end,
Well, that's the question then. So let's go to this painting, which is called now it's the women's turn, which is interesting because we actually had a debate on that. we started, because I see it in a very simplistic way where he's just sort of saying, what happened in Armenia, what happened with the Holocaust, all of these wars are because things, and again, it's like this election, but, everything that's been screwed up so far is because of men. And so maybe now we give women's turn, and you interpret it a little bit differently.
Yeah, I think I took a darker turn on it. He'd come from Marilee's house. And she's pointing out to him that women also, suffer injuries from war and they're victims of war. She even says, he says, I lost an eye in the war. And she said, yeah, so did Maria and Lucretia, which are the two women in her house, the cook. And the other one is a one-eyed woman who let him into the house. And he appeared to not have even noticed that she only had one eye, just like him. They suffer all these invisible silent injuries, and he gets medals and awards for, his injuries, and they don't. And so you go to now it's the women's turn, and she's just gotten. I mean, in the book, not in timeline, but in the book, you've just seen him at Marilee's place in Italy, and with her making all of these pronouncements about women suffering, and he in the painting itself, there are a couple of women that he talks about in detail. One of them is the bloated corpse of a gypsy queen with jewels spilling out of her mouth. And nobody's coming close enough to even see that there's diamonds and rubies spilling out of her mouth. And the other is in the corner of it. There's a building, and it's done at a split, so you can kind of see invisibly what's in the basement.
Right.
And there are women hiding from the soldiers. So we're in Happy Valley. He calls it Happy Valley, and everybody is about to be liberated, and the women are still in pretty bad shape. And it almost seems as though they're hiding from it. It's always their turn for more suffering, even though they're in Happy Valley. I took a little bit of a dark turn.
Because you're bringing me up to two questions, and then we'll end this thing. I'm putting you on the spot about, because Vonnegut opened Slapstick, one of his earlier books, and he's known for opening with introductions and adding them later. These really first-person introductions to his works that are actually part of the work. Mm-hmm. And in Slapstick, he says he doesn't understand the love he doesn't understand love for a woman more than love for a dog. Then he loves dogs. He doesn't really kind of get that. And it's interesting. We had a discussion, and she hasn't seen the other videos, but we had a discussion earlier in one of the videos where I just discussed race. I didn't even discuss it in a specific thing. And this idea that people want to say this writer was a misogynist, this writer was a feminist, right? And the same thing, kind of Faulkner or Flannery O'Connor. People love to say, Faulkner was pro African American rights, and that's really not the case. I mean, he wasn't racist, but he wasn't not racist. He was struggling with his own internal racism that his family was racist, and so he had some racist beliefs and some other, anyway. So the question there is, what do you think his take is on women here?
What do I think Vonnegut's take?
Because the reading that you're giving me is a very sort of pro women take, right? I mean
so
he's being critical of our treatment of women.
Yeah, the treatment of the women in the book, like the women don't fare well.
Right.
I mean, they're put downstairs, and they're stuck in marriages they had no intention of entering for the sake of their country, and there's all of these horrible victims of war. But I think that it's not only pro-woman, even though great things aren't happening to women, it's not only pro-woman, it's almost preachy about it, in my opinion. So you've got Marilee's speech. You've also got Cersei Berman, who he clearly doesn't like her interference and whatnot, but he also addresses it as though it's completely necessary. She's pointing out things about his life, and she's sending him to New York on these trips, and she's bringing life back to him. So I think he views women as benevolent and mistreated.
Okay, yeah, no, I mean, in this book more than any, I get that. Where in other books, I'm kind of like, ooh, he didn't just say that, because you can imagine me and his wife, reading his new book that came out that says he doesn't understand how to love, he can't understand the love for a woman more than anything else. Which that brings up the question then: this painting, does Vonnegut think it's is it a masterpiece, and why? What would differentiate this? Because, you're looking at two opposite ends of the spectrum, right? You've got the Dan Gregory type of art, which is pretty much counterfeit, exact replicas of things. And then you've got this complete non-representational thing. And then, this is somewhere in between. I mean, it's not. Well, it's completely representational, but it's not. But it's not of a.
So it's completely representational, and what that would make this a masterpiece, he seems to be saying, is whether he was able to put his soul into it, right?
Right.
And so this is clearly the most meaningful moment of his life, and he's giving backstories to all of these characters in it because he's trying to make it as meaningful as possible, as rich in depth as possible. I found it interesting on his journey to put soul into his paintings when he's using the sateen Duralux. Even though it's non-representational in theory, it's actually secretly representational. In his mind, this is a deer, and these are hunters, and he talked about the neon rods where the soul was. He's literally trying to put representations of souls into these paintings at first, but I think the first time that he maybe succeeds is where he tries to, where he labors over putting not his soul, which is maybe the point that the art school teacher was talking about, but the souls of the individuals into it.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. And then finally, because you have the vocabulary word, Bildungsroman, right, which means coming of age. And then we also use the term Künstlerroman, which is another one of your vocabulary words, which means coming of age of an artist. Now, this does go through his whole life, so clearly this is a Künstlerroman, but I mean, I'm looking for, most of the time in a Bildungsroman, a Künstlerroman, it's not stretched out over a lifetime, right? There's this one moment where you become, when you read Barn Burning, basically, right, familiar, remembered enough. Sardi basically tells the Despain family that his father is going to burn their barn, which leads to his father's death, right? So we see that as that, we don't see him ever actually become an adult, but that's really the moment he became a man. Mm-hmm. So the question is, if we had to pick a moment in here that was the turning point of making him an artist, is it, I would argue probably that it's the potato barn, right? Or the now it's the woman's turn. Or would you think it was when he was doing abstract or when he was doing the non-representational stuff, the modern stuff, or would it be when he was doing the camo stuff in the war? Would it be when he actually finishes Dan Gregory's studio?
Okay, so his coming of age as an artist, so becoming an artist moment,
right.
I agree with you. It's the potato barn.
Yeah, it's got to be the potato barn.
It's got to be the potato barn. Coming of age as a man, where do you think it is? I think in Rebo's mind, he thought that his coming of age as a man
was when he had sex.
Oh,
clearly, yeah.
And Merrily thinks that is so stupid and immature, so maybe his actual maturity, his actual coming of age was accepting that berating from her.
Oh, that's interesting too. Well, and again, you pointed, she berated him. Was that when she was being lit? When
she was being lit from above. So she's in this grand palace that's built by one of the Medici, Vincenzo de' Medici, the Invisible. And he used to stand in the middle of this rotunda and receive his cousins, the Pope, and things. And he's dressed like a monk, and he's hidden his face, and he's clearly holy, right?
Right.
Well, she's in the chorister, which is like all those windows at the top of a dome that pour the light in. And in this dome, there's a painting, and it's got God and Jesus and angels and whatnot looking down on her. And so she's lit from above with all of these deities looking down on her in the center of this room making these pronouncements.
Right. So we were talking about before the video, you get this very, to me, it's sort of a Virgin Mary image, or this sort of, my grandmother was an artist, both non-representational, abstract, and representational. And she actually did, have you seen that painting, Job's Wife? It's not one of her best works. She's dead, but she did a painting where it's sort of, I kind of saw Job's Wife as logic in the whole thing. She could give me a lot of trouble here, but the point is, again, she kind of had her bringing light to, Job, and so it's in my mind, it kind of looks like that. Not Lot's wife, Job's wife. I'm talking about the right person. Don't think I'm confused. Like everybody else. All right, anything else we're forgetting before we kill this hot mess?
Nope. I think that's it.
All right. Well, thanks, Jennifer, for being here, because she made this make a whole lot more sense than I normally do. I need to trim my beard because I realize I look homeless and puffy. Looking at myself on the screen. And so if you haven't read Bluebeard, make sure you do, because it's going to be a lot of what's on your final. And so, and this will probably be my last video unless I do a review for your final video, which I may do next week. So see you later. Thanks, Jennifer.
happened to you? I know it's been a while, but I thought I might follow through. You knew me as a child, love. I'd never known any city big enough to shake us. Now we've allowed time and space to build a wall and break us. Would you let me know I can do this on my own? I keep it together in all kinds of weather with you in my mind. Come on, you know how I do. My pride is pilot always. Are we just dazed and confused, or better in the old days? I'd never known any city big enough to shake us. Would you let me know I can do this on my own? I keep it together in all kinds of weather with you in my mind. Would you let me know I can do this on my own? I keep it together in all kinds of weather with you in my mind.